Welcome to FOGMAN Stories. Do you believe in ghosts, restless spirits, and mysteries that defy explanation? If not, you just might change your mind after hearing tonight's story. There are places where the air turns cold the moment you step inside. There are whispers in the dead of night, footsteps echoing in empty hallways, and there are shadows lurking just beyond your sight. Watching, waiting? These are not just stories. These are real encounters, told by those who have faced the unknown. And now, you are about to step into their world. Before we begin, make sure you're ready. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and join us as we explore the darkest, most chilling tales ever told. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another terrifying story, because one day, you might just have a story of your own to tell. FOGMAN Stories. The nightmares are only beginning. Story 1. The full moon hung high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the silent town. Nights like these always made me wonder, what lurks in the shadows when the world sleeps? Tonight, I was about to find out. This was no ordinary evening. This was an investigation into the unknown. And if history had taught me anything, it was that the spirits of the past never truly rest. This case started with a call. A family living in an old Victorian home had been experiencing strange occurrences, unexplainable noises. Flickering lights, cold drafts creeping through the hallways even when all the windows were shut. They needed answers, and that's where we came in. The team at Paranormal Research and Investigations, PRI, was ready to uncover the truth. Our team rolled up to the house in 3 black SUVs, each marked with the PRI emblem. We stepped out, dressed in black windbreakers, equipped with EMF readers, infrared cameras, and digital recorders. This wasn't just another night, it was a mission to confront whatever unseen forces resided within these walls. Joining us for the first time were 2 new investigators, Rebecca Ford and Jessica Langley. Rebecca was introduced to me by a mutual friend who had encountered the paranormal firsthand. A chilling story about a ghostly child appearing at the foot of his bed in an old apartment in Nevada. The child's history was tragic. He had drowned in the bathtub years before, and his spirit never left. That encounter led Rebecca down the path of paranormal investigation. And now she was here, ready to face the unknown. As we stepped inside, we were greeted by Thomas Grant, the homeowner and a local artist. His home was filled with bizarre artwork, wire sculptures trapping doll heads, Gothic paintings depicting lost souls. He admitted that he often felt something watching him, especially from the closet in his bedroom. He had even named the entities: the squatter, the pacer, the bride and groom, and the dark one. The latter, he claimed, was the most sinister of them all. We began by setting up infrared cameras and motion sensors in the main areas where Thomas had experienced activity. The hallway, where the pacer was said to roam, was our first stop. As we moved closer, the temperature dropped suddenly, sending shivers down our spines. Rebecca, sensitive to energies, stopped in her tracks and whispered, "There's something here." Our EMF reader spiked. Then, a loud bang echoed from the other room. We rushed in, only to find a painting lying face down on the floor. It had been securely hanging just minutes before. The team spread out, scanning for any explanation, but nothing seemed out of place, except for the thick, oppressive feeling that now lingered in the air. Jessica sat in the bedroom where Thomas claimed he felt the most presence. She closed her eyes, focusing, "There's someone in the closet," she muttered. We aimed our infrared cameras toward the dark corner. A sudden shadow darted across the screen. We froze. No one had moved, yet the camera had caught something real. Moments later, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. We all turned, flashlights ready, but there was nothing. The atmosphere in the house had shifted. It felt heavier, more charged. Thomas led us to the basement, where he believed the most malevolent spirit, the Dark One, resided. As soon as we stepped down, an overwhelming sense of dread washed over us. It was colder here, unnaturally so. "I don't like this," Rebecca muttered, rubbing her arms. The second we turned on the spirit box, a chilling voice crackled through. "Leave." Jessica's breath hitched. "Did you hear that?" The voice repeated, but this time it was louder. "Leave, now." The hair on my arms stood up. A sharp thud sounded against the far wall, as if something had been thrown. My flashlight flickered, and suddenly, shadows shifted unnaturally along the walls. Thomas gasped, "It's here." At that moment, the basement door slammed shut upstairs. Rebecca screamed. I ran to the stairs, pushing against the door, but it wouldn't budge. Something, or someone, was keeping us trapped. Then, out of nowhere, a low growl filled the space around us. It wasn't human. A rush of icy wind blasted through, nearly knocking me off balance. The spirit box hissed with static before the voice returned, guttural and menacing. "Get out." The moment the door finally burst open, we didn't hesitate. We scrambled upstairs, gasping for air. Whatever was down there, it did not want us there, and it had made that very clear. By the time we wrapped up the investigation, we had hours of footage and recordings to review. As we played back the night's events, we discovered a disembodied voice whispering, "Leave," before it was heard on the spirit box. A series of cold spots appearing and disappearing on thermal imaging. A dark figure caught on the infrared camera moving near the closet. But the most chilling discovery? The moment the basement door slammed shut, our cameras picked up a shadowy form standing at the bottom of the stairs. It was large, hunched, and completely black. It had been there all along. Some hauntings are residual, like echoes from the past. But others are intelligent. They react, they interact, and they watch. The Grant house case was one of those. It was clear that whatever was in that house wasn't just lingering, it was aware of us. And it didn't want us there. As I drove home, my mind replayed every eerie moment of the night. The world of the paranormal is unpredictable, and though we seek answers, sometimes we're left with even more questions. But one thing was certain, this case was far from over. So, the next time you hear a whisper in an empty room, or feel eyes watching you in the dark, maybe you should listen. Until next time, stay curious and maybe keep a light on. Story 2. Alright, gather around folks, because I have a story that will make your skin crawl. This isn't just any ghost tale or urban legend. This is something that really happened to me. And even now, I can't fully explain it. If you've ever had a dream that felt more real than reality itself, or felt something lurking just beyond the edge of your perception, then this story is for you. It happened a few months ago, but the memory is still fresh, like a wound that refuses to heal. I went to bed like any other night, expecting nothing more than a normal, forgettable dream. But what I experienced was far from normal. I was in my room, sitting at my desk, reaching out to turn on my computer. You know how, when your screen is off, it reflects your face like a dark mirror? Well, when I looked, I didn't see my own reflection. Instead, I saw it. The thing staring back at me wasn't human. It had hollow eyes, sunken into a void of endless blackness, and a twisted, gaping mouth that looked like it was stretching into an unnatural grin. The air around me grew cold, like something was pulling the warmth straight out of my body. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe it was just a distortion on the screen. But then it moved. It didn't just move, it shifted independently of me, reacting to something unseen. Before I could react, everything changed. I was no longer in my room. The world around me had melted away into darkness. A vast, suffocating nothingness. The silence was deafening, broken only by the faintest murmurs, whispers just out of reach. Like voices calling to me from behind an invisible barrier. I wasn't alone. There was something else in that darkness with me. Watching, stalking. I couldn't see it, but I felt its presence pressing in from all sides. It wasn't just an unseen force, it was aware, intelligent, malevolent. I tried to move, to run, but my body felt heavy, as if unseen hands were dragging me down. The longer I remained, the weaker I became. It was draining me, devouring me. I don't know how I knew, but I could feel it trying to take something from me, my energy, my soul, my very essence. Then, out of nowhere, a phrase formed in my mind. I didn't know where it came from, but it was there, clear and unwavering. In the name of Jesus Christ, leave me alone. I said the words, and instantly, the atmosphere changed. The darkness recoiled. The pressure vanished. The whispers fell silent. And just like that, I was back in my room, gasping for breath. For several moments, I just sat there, unable to process what had just happened. My hands were trembling, and my breathing was uneven. It wasn't just a normal nightmare, I knew that much. It was something real, something sinister. The thing is, I didn't grow up religious. I never memorized prayers or had any spiritual practices. And yet, in that moment, I knew exactly what to say. It was as if the words had been placed in my mind at the exact moment I needed them. The next day, I told my mother about it. She listened closely, her expression growing more serious with every detail I shared. Before I could even finish, she interrupted me, saying, "If anything like that ever happens again, say, in the name of Jesus Christ, go away." It was eerie, how quickly she knew the solution. As if she had been waiting for this moment. That's when she admitted that she, too, had experienced something similar in the past. That conversation only deepened my unease. Had I been targeted by something beyond my comprehension? Was this just a random event? Or was there a reason why this entity had appeared to me? As the days passed, I tried to shake the feeling that something had changed in me. I wasn't the same after that night. I felt like I had been marked. Like something had tried to take hold of me and failed, but hadn't forgotten. Nights became difficult. Every time I closed my eyes, I feared I would find myself back in that void, unable to escape. I began sleeping with a light on, something I hadn't done since I was a child. And then, it happened again. A week later, I had another dream. This time, I wasn't in my room. I was in an unfamiliar place. A vast, empty landscape shrouded in darkness. The air was thick, suffocating, and I wasn't alone. The whispers returned, growing louder and more aggressive. And then, I saw it again. The same hollow-eyed figure, standing just beyond the edge of my vision. It didn't move, but I could feel its gaze locked onto me. Panic surged through me, and instinctively, I spoke the words again. "In the name of Jesus Christ, leave me alone." The moment I uttered them, the darkness shattered like glass, and I woke up in my bed, drenched in sweat. I don't know why this was happening to me. I don't know what it wanted. But I do know this: it was real. And it was relentless. I'm convinced I encountered something truly evil those nights. And I don't know why it chose me. But I do know one thing: I'll never forget those encounters. And I'll never let my guard down again. If anyone else has had an experience like this, I'd love to hear about it. Maybe we aren't as alone in the dark as we like to think. Some people believe that spirits and demons prey on those who are weak. Maybe that's true, or maybe they just prey on those who don't know how to fight back. But here's what I've learned: faith, even in the smallest amount, has power. If there's something lurking in the darkness, waiting for its moment to strike, then maybe, just maybe, there's something out there protecting us too. So the next time you find yourself staring into the void and it stares back at you, just remember, you are not powerless. And sometimes, the right words can be the only thing standing between you and the abyss. Story 3. They say ghosts only haunt old places, abandoned mansions, creaky Victorian homes, or forgotten cemeteries. But what if I told you that sometimes spirits cling to places that have no history of death? No tragic backstory? This is my story, and I need to know. How is it possible that my brand new house is haunted? It all started when I was about 12 or 13 years old. I was in the kitchen one afternoon, eating a blueberry muffin, when something caught my eye. A young boy, no older than 9 or 10, with messy blonde hair and a blue shirt, ran up the stairs. I didn't think much of it. I figured it was my brother or maybe one of his friends who had stayed over the night before. But when I went to check, I found my brother and his friends still fast asleep, none of them wearing a blue shirt. That was the first time. About a week later, I had a friend over for a sleepover. We were watching TV when a sudden, sweet smell filled the air. Blueberries. I immediately remembered that I had been eating a blueberry muffin the first time I saw the boy. My friend smelled it too, but neither of us could figure out where it was coming from. That night, I was in the kitchen again, and my eyes were drawn to the mirror near the front door. A faint glow shimmered in the reflection. I stepped closer, squinting at the glass. For a brief moment, I saw the face of a young woman. She was beautiful, with soft blonde hair and delicate features. My heart pounded as I rushed toward the mirror. But when I got there, she was gone. The only sign of anything unusual was the coat hangers near the door, swaying gently, as if someone had just brushed past them. Strange things continued to happen over the next couple of years. My mother, who worked early morning shifts, came home one day and sat down to eat breakfast when the garage door began to open and close on its own. She was terrified, but she tried to dismiss it as a mechanical issue. Another time, our dog, Maisie, reacted to something none of us could see. It was around 10 at night, and my mom was getting ready for bed. My dad was out of town, and my brother and I were asleep. Maisie, who had been resting quietly, suddenly bolted upright and started barking aggressively at the empty hallway. My mom tried to calm her down, but then Maisie did something strange. She crouched low to the ground, Her ears flattened, and she squinted her eyes as if someone was reaching toward her. Then, whimpering, she ran straight into my room and jumped onto my bed. Trembling, my mom followed her, trying to coax her back out. But Maisie refused. She just kept crying. For a while, things settled down. I let myself forget about the strange occurrences, convincing myself it had all been my imagination. But then, last night, something happened that I can't ignore. I woke up in the middle of the night to find a little girl sitting at the foot of my bed. She was young, maybe 6 years old, with short blonde hair and bangs. She didn't say a word. Instead, she just stared at me with wide, curious eyes. I sat up, my heart hammering in my chest. I wasn't afraid, not exactly, more confused than anything. "Who are you?" I whispered. No answer. I asked her again, but she just tilted her head, looking almost amused. Finally, I handed her a notebook and a pen from my nightstand. She took it and carefully wrote down a name. When I looked at the paper, I was startled to see that the name was in another language. It looked like German, which I had been learning in school. But when I asked her, she shook her head and pointed at the word again. "French?" I asked. She nodded. I tried to pronounce the name, but I wasn't sure I got it right. The girl just giggled softly and started playing with my stuffed animals as if she had always been there. As if this were normal. I wanted to ask her more questions, where she came from, why she was here, how she had died, but I hesitated. She seemed happy, and I didn't want to scare her away. Before I could say anything else, she simply disappeared. This morning, I told my family what had happened. I asked if they had ever heard of a young French girl who had died around here. But they all gave me the same confused look. Our house was new, no tragic past, no record of anyone dying on the property. So why were these spirits here? Now, I have another question. Would it be safe to use a Ouija board to try and get answers? Part of me is terrified to open that door, but another part of me needs to know the truth. Some hauntings make sense. An old asylum, a tragic accident, a murder scene. These are the places we expect to find ghosts. But what about a brand new house? This story raises an unsettling possibility that some spirits are not bound by place, but by something else entirely. Maybe they are drawn to certain people rather than locations. Maybe they aren't even tied to death, but to moments, memories, emotions, echoes of the past that refuse to fade. And maybe, just maybe, the dead don't need a reason to linger. Maybe sometimes, they just do. So what do you think? If this were your house, would you try to make contact? Or would you leave well enough alone? Story 4. Hey everyone. Gather around because I've got a story that's going to send chills down your spine. You know those nights when you're just minding your own business, doing your thing, and suddenly, the world around you starts acting strange? Well, this is one of those nights. And trust me, after you hear this, you might just start double-checking your own devices before going to bed. It all started just about an hour ago. And as I'm writing this, whatever this is, well, it's still happening. The activity has stopped for about 10 minutes now. But the feeling hasn't left me. It's like the air is heavier. Like something is still here. Lurking. Watching. I was sitting at my desk, my eyes glued to my laptop screen, trying to finish up some last-minute research for an assignment. My phone had been going off constantly with calls from my friend. And I was getting annoyed. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I turned it off. Not just locked the screen or put it on silent. I powered it down completely. That was mistake number one. I put in my earbuds, turned up my music, and tried to focus. The warm glow of my desk lamp, the hum of my computer, everything was normal. Until it wasn't. Out of nowhere, my phone started ringing. My phone, the one I had just turned off. I froze for a second, staring at the black screen before hesitantly picking it up. The name flashing on the screen? My friend. Confused, I answered. Hello? Hey, finally, you picked up. I've been calling for ages. I barely heard the words, my heart pounding in my chest. Wait, what? I turned my phone off. Like, completely off. There was a pause. What do you mean? I just called your cell. It rang. You answered. My fingers clenched around the phone. I pulled it away and stared at the screen. It was off again. Like, completely black. No battery indicator. Nothing. I swallowed hard. Never mind, I muttered before hanging up. A few minutes passed. I shook it off, chalking it up to some weird glitch. Maybe I hadn't actually turned it off. Maybe I was just tired. Yeah, that had to be it. Then my music stopped. I frowned and clicked over to iTunes. Everything looked normal. The song was still playing. Just silently. My speakers were fine. I twisted the volume knob up, down. Nothing. I leaned in close, pressing my ear near the speaker, trying to hear even the faintest sound. Then the music blasted back on. I screamed and shot back, nearly falling out of my chair. Not because I was scared, no. It was because the volume was so loud it physically hurt my ears. I yanked my earbuds out, my hands shaking. What the hell was going on? I was still recovering when my computer screen flickered. Then, in the span of a heartbeat, it powered off completely and turned back on. No loading screen, no reboot process, just a black screen to a full desktop in under a second. I had had enough. I stomped upstairs to ask my dad if anything weird was going on in the house. Maybe a power surge or something. But he just shook his head, barely looking up from his book. Nope, everything's fine. Fine. I took a deep breath and returned to my room, determined to just finish my essay and forget about the whole thing. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew something was different. The air felt charged, like static before a lightning strike. My skin prickled, and then I noticed it. My phone? On. My iPod? On. My camera? On. Everything else? Off. My laptop, my speakers, my lights, they were all dead. But the devices that shouldn't have even been on in the first place? They glowed eerily in the dim room, as if waiting for me. I took a hesitant step forward. My speakers, they weren't just off. The physical switch had been flipped to off. Someone, or something, had turned them off. My fingers hovered over the switch before I forced myself to flip it back. The second I did, my phone screen flickered, my camera shutter clicked, my iPod screen glowed brighter. I grabbed my phone and manually shut it off again. Same with my iPod and camera. Then, cautiously, I powered my computer back on. And now, here I am, writing this out as fast as I can while the silence in my room grows heavier. But it didn't stop there. The screen of my laptop suddenly froze. The cursor moved on its own, dragging itself slowly across the screen. It opened a text document. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't type a single letter. Yet words appeared. Are you alone? I slammed the laptop shut and jumped back. my breath coming in ragged gasps. My phone, still turned off, vibrated against the desk. My camera lens extended, like it was preparing to take a picture. My room was ice cold. The air felt suffocating. I wanted to leave. I needed to leave, but my legs refused to move. Then, just as suddenly as it began, everything stopped. The laptop screen went dark. The camera lens retracted. The phone sat motionless. The air lightened, like whatever had been there was gone. I don't know what just happened. I don't know if it's over. But I do know one thing. My phone is still off. And it just rang. If you've made it this far, tell me, what do you think happened to me? Was it a glitch, a power surge, or was something else trying to communicate? All I know is, from now on, I'm sleeping with all my devices off. And maybe, just maybe, I won't be sleeping alone. What do you think? Let me know. And if you ever experience something like this, well, good luck. Story 5. I've got a story for you today that might just send chills down your spine. You ever hear about kids having imaginary friends? Cute, right? But what if that friend isn't so imaginary? What if it starts influencing them in ways that are unsettling? Well, let me tell you about something that happened to a mother and her little boy. And you can decide for yourself whether it's just a child's overactive imagination, or something much, much darker. When Laura moved into her quaint little house on the outskirts of a small town, she never imagined she'd be dealing with anything out of the ordinary. Life was simple: wake up, get her 4-year-old son, Jake, ready for preschool, go to work, come home, and do it all over again. It wasn't a perfect life, but it was stable. That is, until Jake started talking about his friend. At first, Laura didn't think much of it. A lot of kids have imaginary friends, it's just something they do. But something about the way Jake talked about his friend unsettled her. "What's your friend's name?" she asked him one afternoon while they were playing with his toys in the living room. Jake hesitated before mumbling, "He doesn't have one." "No name? That's strange. What does he look like?" "He's tall. He wears dark clothes. And he smells funny." That last part sent a shiver down Laura's spine. Smelled funny? What did that even mean? But she brushed it off, assuming it was just one of those weird things kids say. As time went on, though, Jake's behavior began to change. He would whisper to himself when no one was around, or laugh at seemingly nothing. Then there were the moments when Laura would find him standing in the hallway at night, facing the wall, completely still. When she'd ask him what he was doing, he'd just say, "Talking to my friend." Things escalated when Laura started noticing strange occurrences around the house. The TV would turn on by itself, playing nothing but static. The lights flickered, even after she had an electrician check the wiring. At night, she could hear what sounded like soft humming through the baby monitor in Jake's room. But when she checked, he was fast asleep. Then came the night of the turtle incident. Laura had been in the kitchen, finishing up the dishes, when she noticed an odd smell in the air. It was strong, floral, like perfume. It didn't belong. Following the scent, she walked down the hall to Jake's room and found him standing over his turtle's tank. The water inside now murky and clouded with something oily. "Jake, what are you doing?" she exclaimed, rushing to his side. The smell was overwhelming now, making her eyes water. Jake turned to her, his small face contorted in guilt. I poured the bottle in." "The perfume?" "Jake, Why would you do that? He hesitated, then whispered, "He told me to." Laura's blood ran cold. "Who?" "My friend. He makes me do things. Bad things." She knelt beside him, gripping his shoulders. "Jake, listen to me. Your friend is not real. He can't make you do anything." Tears welled up in Jake's eyes. "He says if I don't listen, he'll be mad." Laura took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "Your friend is not welcome here. Jake, he needs to leave, now." Jake's face twisted with sadness. "But I'll miss him." "No, you won't. A real friend doesn't make you do bad things." That night, Laura decided to stay up and keep watch. Around 3 a.m., she heard the sound of soft giggling coming from Jake's room. Her heart pounded as she crept toward the door, slowly pushing it open. Jake was sitting up in bed, facing the corner of the room, whispering to the darkness. She flipped on the light. "Jake, who are you talking to?" He turned slowly, his expression blank. "My friend says you don't want him here." Laura's skin prickled. "That's right, Jake. He's not welcome." For a moment, the air felt heavier. The room seemed darker, like the shadows had thickened. And then, just as suddenly as it came, the feeling was gone. Jake yawned and rubbed his eyes, suddenly looking exhausted. "I'm sleepy, Mommy." Laura tucked him in and sat beside him until he drifted off. She barely slept that night, listening for any more sounds. But everything was silent. But things didn't end there. Over the next few days, Laura started experiencing something even more terrifying. She would wake up in the middle of the night feeling like someone was watching her. There were moments when she'd hear light footsteps in the hallway, but every time she checked, there was no one there. One morning, she woke up to find a child's handprint on her bedroom mirror, too high for Jake to have reached. She became desperate. She called in a priest to bless the house, hoping it would rid them of whatever was lurking there. The priest walked through each room, murmuring prayers, sprinkling holy water. When he reached Jake's room, he paused. He turned to Laura with a troubled expression. "There's something here," he said, "something that does not want to leave." Laura felt a chill run through her. "What do we do?" The priest took out a small vial of oil and began drawing crosses on the walls. "We make it leave." That night, Laura sat beside Jake's bed, holding his hand while he slept. She whispered reassurances, telling him everything would be okay. But just before she drifted off, she heard it, whispering, right next to her ear. "Don't make me go." She jumped up, heart racing. The room was empty, but the air was thick with something, anger, maybe even desperation. The next morning, Laura found Jake's room in disarray. His toys were scattered, the bed sheets ripped from the mattress. On the wall, written in a child's shaky handwriting, were the words, "I miss you, Jake." That was the last straw. Laura packed their bags and moved out that very day. Whatever was in that house wasn't leaving, and she wasn't about to risk her son's safety. From that night on, Laura never let Jake talk about his friend again. Slowly, he stopped mentioning him. The nightmares became less frequent, and the strange occurrences, they ceased. But every now and then, when Laura checks on Jake while he's sleeping, she swears she can feel a pair of unseen eyes watching her from the darkness. So, what do you think? Was it just the overactive imagination of a 4-year-old? Or was there really something lurking in that house, whispering in the ear of an innocent child? One thing's for sure, sometimes, imaginary friends might not be so imaginary after all. Story 6. Have you ever felt like something was always watching you? That eerie sensation of eyes lingering on you even when you're completely alone? It's unsettling, isn't it? Some people brush it off as paranoia, others as a trick of the mind. But what if it wasn't just a feeling? What if something really was there, lurking in the shadows, following you no matter where you went? This is the story of Mark, a guy who lived with that fear all his life. I've changed the names and places in this story to respect privacy. But let me assure you, every single detail is real. Mark grew up like any normal kid. His family moved around quite a bit, never staying in one place for too long. But no matter where they lived, one thing always remained the same: the bathrooms. More specifically, the feeling he got whenever he stepped into one. The moment he crossed the threshold with the lights off, a chill would crawl up his spine. It was as if the air itself changed, growing heavier, charged with something unseen. He first noticed it when he was around 7 or 8. He would walk into the bathroom, and almost every time, the shower curtain would shift, just a slight rustle, as if someone had brushed against it. But the worst part? If the curtain was already open, he would see something in the tub. A small shadowy figure, unmoving. A girl. She never acknowledged him, never moved, never looked at him. She was just there, sitting in the bathtub, playing with something invisible in her hands. He would blink, and she would be gone. At first, Mark was terrified. He would avoid the bathroom whenever he could, holding it in until he couldn't anymore, dashing in and out as quickly as possible. He never told anyone at first, afraid of sounding crazy. But as time passed, he began to test it. He started walking past the bathroom slower, pausing in the doorway, leaving the door open just a crack when he was inside, just to see if she would appear. And she did. Sometimes, he would catch glimpses of her in the mirror, a blurred shape standing just behind him. Other times, he would hear a faint giggle, the sound barely there but unmistakable. His parents thought it was just a phase, brushing off his fear as childhood imagination. But Mark knew better. He could feel her watching him. When he turned 10, it stopped. No more flickering shadows. No more rustling curtains. For 2 years, things were quiet. He started to think maybe it had all been in his head. Maybe it really was just childhood fear. Then he turned 12. The lights started acting up. It began subtly, flickering as he entered the bathroom, the bulb dimming for no reason. But then, things escalated. He would be showering, eyes closed under the stream of water, and suddenly, complete darkness. The light would flicker and then go out entirely, leaving him trapped in the pitch-black room with nothing but the sound of his own breathing. He would stumble out, heart hammering, his hands fumbling for the switch. And that feeling would return. The oppressive weight of unseen eyes, watching, waiting. Sometimes, he would hear shuffling sounds outside the bathroom door, like small feet padding against the floor. But every time he checked, no one was there. His parents swore it was just the old pipes in the house. But the fear in Mark's gut told him otherwise. The activity came and went in waves. Weeks would pass without incident. And then suddenly, everything would start again. The shadows, the flickering, the suffocating presence. It followed him through every home, every city, never fully disappearing. As he grew older, he stopped talking about it. Who would believe him anyway? A haunted bathroom? It sounded ridiculous. And yet, the fear never left him. When he moved out for college, he thought he was finally free. His dorm room had its own tiny bathroom, And for the first few weeks, everything seemed normal. But then, one night, as he brushed his teeth, he saw it again. A shadow, just behind the curtain, barely visible in the dim light. It hadn't left. His roommate never noticed anything strange. But Mark started experiencing the same things all over again. The flickering lights, the rustling curtain, the giggling that would echo softly in the tiled space. It didn't matter where he went. Whatever this was, it was following him. At 22, the disturbances have finally stopped. The lights stay on. The shower curtain remains still. And the oppressive presence seems to have vanished. But the memories remain. Every time he steps into a bathroom, there's still that split second of hesitation. That whisper of a doubt in the back of his mind. What if it's still there? What if it's just waiting? There are stories of spirits attaching themselves to people rather than places. We often assume hauntings are tied to old houses, cemeteries, or tragic sites. But what if sometimes they choose a person? What if they follow, waiting in the background, watching from the corners of our vision? Mark's story isn't unique. Many people have reported similar experiences, unseen presences, flickering lights, the feeling of being watched. But what makes his case so chilling is that it happened across multiple locations. Whatever this was, it wasn't bound to a single house. It was bound to him. So, what do you think? A wandering spirit? A lingering shadow from another realm? Or something else entirely? If you've ever had a similar experience, you might want to ask yourself, are you really alone? Story 7. You ever get that feeling when you're talking with someone, and suddenly, a long-buried memory just comes rushing back? Well, that's exactly what happened to me and my mom one night. We were sitting in the kitchen, casually chatting about random things, when I mentioned something weird that had happened in my room recently. One thing led to another, and before we knew it, we were reminiscing about the eerie experiences we had when we lived in that old, decrepit trailer back in a small, forgotten town in Alaska. We left that place when I was 7. And now, after nearly 8 years of living in the capital, those memories had started to fade. But that night, as we talked, they came back in full force. And let me tell you, they were just as chilling as they had been back then. I figured it was time to share these experiences. My family's given me permission to talk about them, though I won't be using any real names. What you're about to hear isn't fiction. This is real, and to this day, I still don't have an explanation for what happened in that trailer. I must have been around 4 years old when the first incident happened. I remember it so clearly, not because it was terrifying, which it was, but because it was downright frustrating. See, I had a bunk bed back then, always slept on the top, because, you know, shadows on the floor at night are a big no-no for a kid. Even though there was a rail and ladder, I was still paranoid about falling. So I'd press myself as close to the wall as possible. One particular night, I woke up to a faint whisper. At first, I thought it was my mom calling me. But as I listened closer, I realized it wasn't coming from outside my room. It was coming from right next to me. Hey, the whisper was barely there. But I felt a breath against my ear. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing it to go away. But then, it got louder, more insistent. Wake up. My heart pounded in my little chest. But I refused to move. I stayed completely still, hoping that whatever it was would just leave me alone. And then, it happened. Strong, unseen hands grabbed me. I didn't even have time to scream before I was yanked up and tossed off the bed. The next thing I knew, I was on the floor, surrounded by a mess of books and toys. My room had been trashed. I started bawling, as any kid would, and my mom rushed in, only to find me sitting in the chaos. She scolded me for making a mess and said I must have fallen. But I knew I hadn't. Something had thrown me. The next morning, my mom refused to take me to my grandma's until I cleaned up my room. Begrudgingly, I spent over an hour putting everything back in its place. I had just finished when I heard her call my name from the other end of the trailer. Or at least, I thought I did. I walked out to see what she wanted, only to find her staring at me in confusion. "I didn't call you," she said. Chills ran down my spine. When we walked back to my room, we both stopped dead in our tracks. The room was destroyed again. Books, toys, clothes, everything was scattered across the floor. Even worse than before, my mom gave me a look, the kind that said, "I don't have time for this nonsense," and told me to clean it again. But as she left the room, I swear, I heard laughter, a taunting, childlike giggle that sent shivers down my spine. "That's not funny," I said aloud, more to myself than anything. "Stop it." I cleaned it again, and this time, the mess didn't return. My mom was home alone one afternoon, chatting with my grandma on the phone, when something happened that shook her to her core. In the trailer, there was a big yellow door that led to a storage area. We never used it. It was always locked, always shut. But that day, as my mom absent-mindedly stared at it while talking, she saw the handle start to turn. Slowly, deliberately, the door creaked open. She froze, the phone slipping from her fingers. No one else was home. Then, as if something on the other side had changed its mind, the door slammed shut with a force so strong it rattled the entire trailer. My mom didn't stick around to investigate. She bolted out the front door and ran all the way to my grandma's house. My dad, let's call him Jim, had a terrifying experience of his own. One night, he had a vivid dream, or at least, he thought it was a dream. In it, he found himself floating above his own body. He could see himself and my mom sleeping in bed, everything appearing so real, so clear. But then, he started drifting toward the closet, the one with the full-length mirror. Suddenly, ghostly hands emerged from the mirror, grabbing his legs, pulling him in. He struggled, trying to fight back, but the hands were relentless, yanking him deeper and deeper into that otherworldly reflection. Just when he thought he was lost, he snapped back into his body, gasping for air. The bed was soaked in sweat. From that night on, he refused to sleep in that bedroom. Until the day we moved, he spent every night on the couch. The final straw came when my mom and I witnessed something impossible. It was a month after my 7th birthday. We had just come back from the store, my little brother trailing behind us. As we stepped inside, we both saw it, a large goblet, one my mom always kept on top of the TV, slowly lifting into the air. For a moment, it hovered, as if an invisible hand was holding it up. Then, without warning, it shot across the room and smashed into the wall. We didn't scream. We didn't say a word. We just turned right back around, shut the door, and went straight to my grandma's. We left that trailer not long after. To this day, I don't know what haunted that place, but I know it was something real, something angry. Whatever it was, it wanted us gone, and eventually, it got its wish. Story 8. This isn't just any ghost story. It's a true account that will make you question what you believe about the spirit world. And trust me, by the time we get to the end, you'll be glancing over your shoulder, wondering if someone, or something, is watching you. Now, let's get into it. My dad has this friend. Let's call him Mike. Mike has a daughter, and I swear this little girl can see spirits. Let's call her Lily. Lily is only 7 years old, and she has autism. She's also gradually losing her hearing, right now. She can still hear somewhat, but the doctors say that in time, she'll go completely deaf. Lily has always been a little different, not just because of her condition, but because of the way she interacts with things no one else can see. Since she was a toddler, she would often stare into corners, laugh at nothing, or suddenly become distressed for no apparent reason. Her parents always assumed it was part of her autism, but over time, things started happening that made them question if something else was going on. Now, if you've ever heard my story about the water heater incident, you'll know that I strongly believe there's a spirit in my dad's house. One day, I was over at my dad's place, hanging out with Mike and Lily's mom, while Lily played with her dolls. We were just talking, nothing unusual, until Lily suddenly stopped what she was doing and stood in front of the door to the computer room. Lily communicates mostly through sign language, since that's what she's used to at school. At first, we didn't think much of it. Kids do weird things all the time. But then we noticed she was signing something repeatedly. Her mom turned pale and whispered, "She's saying, pay attention." To who? The room was empty. But Lily wasn't just signing to the air, she was getting frustrated. Her hands moved faster, her expression growing more intense, as if she was speaking to multiple people and getting upset that they weren't listening. Her mom watched her carefully and then told us, "She's talking to 2 or 3 people. She's telling them to pay attention, and she's mad that they won't." We exchanged uneasy glances, the room growing eerily silent. Finally, we asked, "Who are you talking to? Lily?" She just looked at us. "What are their names?" we pressed. Lily hesitated before signing. "I don't know. That was the first time we saw it. But it wasn't the last." Another time, Lily was staying at a babysitter's house. Everything was normal until, out of nowhere, she started screaming and crying uncontrollably. The babysitter had no idea what was happening and quickly called her mom to come pick her up. When her mom arrived, she held Lily close, trying to calm her down. But Lily wouldn't speak. She stayed silent for an entire week. When she finally spoke, she told her mom something that sent chills down her spine. "I saw a man and his son standing by the staircase," Lily whispered. "They were scaring me." Her mom's stomach twisted. There was no man and no son in the house. After that, Lily refused to enter any house she had never been to before. She would cling to her mom, shaking her head, refusing to go inside certain places for reasons no one understood. One time, while visiting a friend's house, she stopped at the doorway and backed away slowly, signing, "No, no, no," over and over again. When asked what was wrong, she simply said, "They're watching." But it didn't stop there. Lily's sister, let's call her Sophie, had her own terrifying experience. Sophie was just 3 years old at the time, and she refused to sleep in her own room. After much convincing, her mom finally managed to tuck her into bed, thinking she had won the battle. But as she bent down to kiss her goodnight, Sophie's eyes suddenly widened, staring past her. "What are you looking at, sweetie?" her mom asked. Sophie didn't blink. The lady standing behind you. Her mom spun around. Nothing was there. Later, they found out that the previous owner of the house, an elderly woman, had passed away right there in that very room. For weeks after, Sophie refused to sleep alone. She would wake up crying in the middle of the night, babbling about the lady, whispering in her ear. Her mother would sit with her until she fell asleep. But the moment she left the room, Sophie would start screaming. Eventually, her parents moved her into their room, and only then did she finally sleep peacefully. After these encounters, people started avoiding Lily's house. Friends and family who visited a few times refused to return. They wouldn't say why, only that something felt wrong. Unseen eyes watching, strange noises, shadows in places there shouldn't be any. Even now, I wonder, what exactly does Lily see? And what does she know that we don't? One time, I asked her. I sat next to her, watching as she played with her dolls, and carefully signed, "Do you see people that we can't see?" She nodded. Without looking up, she signed back, "They're always here." I swallowed hard. "Are they nice?" She shook her head. That was the last time I ever asked. Some people believe that children, especially those with special sensitivities, can perceive things beyond our understanding. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, stories like this make you think. If Lily is telling the truth, and I truly believe she is, then who or what is she really seeing? And more importantly, why are they trying so hard to get her attention? What if, all this time, the reason she's losing her hearing is because something wants her to stop listening to the living and start listening to them? Story 9. Alright, let me tell y'all a story. This ain't just some made-up ghost tale. This really happened. If you've ever lived in a house that felt like it had company, the kind you can't see, then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It all started with my dad. Now, my old man ain't one to get scared easy. He's the kinda guy who watches horror movies with a straight face and laughs at the parts where everyone else jumps. But this had him spooked. One night, he was dead asleep when he heard the sound of high heels clicking across the wooden floor. Now, mind you, my mom doesn't own any high heels like that, and even if she did, she sure as hell wouldn't be walking around in the middle of the night just to mess with him. But my dad? He thought that's exactly what she was doing. So, he waited, listening as the steps got closer and closer to the bed. Then, he felt it, a wave of cold air, like someone just opened a freezer right next to him. He turned fast, ready to scare the hell out of my mom, except, there was no one there. A few nights later, it happened again. The same slow, deliberate footsteps echoed through the room. This time, he didn't move. He stayed real still, listening, waiting, and then, it happened. He felt the cold again. But this time, something different happened. The blanket he had on him was pulled up, tucking him in tighter, almost gently. He lay there frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. He waited until the footsteps sounded like they were walking away before he finally turned his head. And you know what? Nothing. No one was there. It wasn't just him, though. I heard those footsteps too. And it didn't stop there. The curtains in the hallway would move even when the windows were shut tight. We'd hear stuff fall in the middle of the night, like something, or someone, was knocking things over just to remind us they were still around. But here's the thing, whatever it was, it didn't feel evil. It didn't feel like it wanted to hurt us. In fact, if anything, it felt caring, protective, like a mother making sure her kids were safe and warm at night. Then came the night that changed everything. My dad had just gone to bed when he heard the same footsteps again. Only this time, they didn't stop. They moved past his room, down the hall, into the living room. Curious, he got up, thinking maybe it was me or my mom. But as he reached the doorway, he saw something that made him freeze. The shadow of a woman stood near the window, outlined against the moonlight. She wasn't moving, just standing there. My dad rubbed his eyes, thinking he was imagining it. But when he looked again, she was gone. He swears he saw her. And honestly, I believe him. After that, things got stranger. Doors would creak open on their own. The sound of whispered voices floated through the house at night. The air would turn ice cold in certain spots, even when the heater was blasting. One time, I was home alone when I heard soft humming coming from my parents' room. It was faint, almost like a lullaby. I crept closer, my heart hammering. But the second I stepped inside, the humming stopped. Just silence, and that cold, heavy feeling in the air. Then my mom started noticing things too. She'd leave something in one place and find it somewhere else. A picture frame would be face down in the morning. The doors of the kitchen cabinets would be slightly open, even though she was sure she closed them the night before. My dad started keeping a journal of everything that happened. The footsteps, the moving objects, the strange noises. He even set up a camera one night, hoping to catch something. And you know what? He did. It wasn't much, just a faint, misty figure moving near the hallway. But that was enough. He showed it to my mom, hoping she'd finally believe him. But she just brushed it off, saying it was probably dust or a trick of the light. She didn't want to believe. But we knew better. Then, one night, something happened that made us all believers. It was late, past midnight. My dad was asleep, my mom beside him. Then, out of nowhere, the bed started shaking. Not violently, but enough to wake them both up. My mom, finally terrified, grabbed my dad's arm. Then, the blankets lifted, on their own, and tucked in around them. Just like before, my dad reached for the lamp. But before he could turn it on, the room went ice cold. The closet door creaked open. And there, standing in the shadows, was a shape, a woman, pale, still, watching. My mom screamed. My dad jumped out of bed, flipping the light on. But by the time he did, she was gone. The next day, my dad called in a friend who knew a thing or two about ghosts. This guy walked through the house and just shook his head. He told us whatever was in here wasn't harmful, but it was attached to the house. He suggested maybe it was the spirit of someone who used to live there. Someone who had unfinished business. That got us thinking. We did some digging, asked around the neighborhood, and sure enough, we found something. Years ago, a woman named Margaret had lived in the house. She had a son, but he died young. People said she never got over it. She would walk the house at night, whispering to him, tucking in his blankets just like she used to when he was alive. Maybe that's what was happening. Maybe Margaret wasn't ready to leave. Maybe she just wanted to keep taking care of whoever lived in her house. Just like she did with her son. Eventually, the activity slowed down. Maybe she realized we weren't going anywhere, and we weren't afraid of her. Or maybe she just found peace. We never saw her again after that night. Maybe she just wanted us to know she was there. Maybe she just wanted to make sure we were safe. I don't know. But what I do know is that house. It was never empty. Not really. So, tell me, have you ever lived in a house that had its own invisible guest? Story 10. Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever found yourself in the middle of nowhere, with only the darkness and the unknown keeping you company? If you have, then you know that eerie feeling. The one that raises the hairs on the back of your neck. The one that makes every little noise sound like something creeping up behind you. Tonight, I have a story for you. A true tale passed down through generations. So sit back, turn off the lights if you dare, and let's dive into a chilling night in the deep woods. Back when he was young, my grandpa, Jeremiah, was a wild man. He was the kind of guy who loved a good drink, had a mouth that could make a sailor blush, and wasn't afraid of anything, or so he thought. One cold autumn night, he and his cousin Buck decided to go raccoon hunting on an old, deserted road near their family's land in the heart of Pine Hollow. If you've ever been raccoon hunting, you know it's a nighttime affair. The deeper into the woods they went, the darker it got, and soon, the only thing guiding them was the dim glow of the headlights from Jeremiah's rusty old car. It was a clunker, a beat-up relic that rattled and groaned more than it ran. But it had gotten them this far. As they drove deeper into the forest, the car sputtered and coughed before giving up completely. It had broken down in the worst possible place, surrounded by nothing but towering trees and absolute silence. They had no flashlight, no lantern, just a nearly empty lighter Jeremiah kept in his pocket. Frustrated, he popped the hood, trying to fix the engine by the flickering glow of the lighter. "Dang thing's useless," he muttered, flicking it again and again, watching the tiny flame dance before it almost gave out. That's when Buck stiffened. "Jeremiah, something's out there." Jeremiah waved him off. "Ain't nothing but the wind. Hold that lighter still." "No, I mean it," Buck whispered. "Something's coming." Before Jeremiah could argue, Buck dropped the lighter and scrambled into the car. Annoyed, Jeremiah turned to scold him, until he saw them. Two yellow eyes, floating in the darkness. No body, no shadow, just two glowing orbs, moving toward him through the trees. Jeremiah felt his stomach drop. He had never believed in ghosts or monsters. But this wasn't natural. His pulse pounded in his ears as the eyes drifted closer. Silent and steady, like they had all the time in the world. "Get in." Buck's voice broke through his trance. And Jeremiah didn't need to be told twice. He dove into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut just as the eyes reached the car. Then, the nightmare began. The eyes started circling the vehicle. Slow at first, then faster, moving in an unnatural rhythm. 1 second, they were on the driver's side. The next, they were by the trunk. Then, they were in front of the windshield, staring straight at them. Jeremiah fumbled with the keys, trying to start the car. But the engine wouldn't turn over. He could feel Buck trembling beside him, whispering a prayer under his breath. "We gotta get out of here." Buck stammered. "I'm trying," Jeremiah yelled, twisting the key so hard it almost snapped. The engine roared to life just as the eyes lunged forward. The moment the headlights hit them, they vanished, just gone. Without hesitation, Jeremiah threw the car into reverse, spinning the tires in the dirt as he sped out of those woods. Not looking back once, they never spoke about that night again, until years later. Jeremiah, who had once been a fearless, reckless man, had changed. He didn't drink as much, didn't cuss as much, and when he became a Christian, he swore on everything he believed in that what he saw that night was real. Now, folks, I don't know about you, but stories like this make me think. Some things in this world just can't be explained. Was it a spirit? A creature lurking in the woods? Or something even darker? Whatever it was, one thing's for sure. There are things out there we are not meant to understand. And with that, we come to the end of our journey tonight. This has been an incredible ride, and I want to thank each and every one of you for joining me in these chilling tales. If you've enjoyed these stories, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and leave a comment with your own eerie experiences. Who knows, maybe your story will be the next one we tell. Until next time, stay safe. Keep the lights on, and remember, some stories are true, whether you believe them or not. Good night, everyone.